Have you been sitting around thinking about starting a YouTube channel? Feeling like you have a lot to say and would love to get on here and make a name for yourself? Yeah. I get you, I've been there. For new YouTubers in the making, get your hands on my Get Started checklist. I'll hold your hand through everything you need to know to just get started already. It's 100% free and you'll be posting your first brilliant video by next week. Check it out at the link below. Last month, a 21-year-old National Guardsman named Jack Douglas Teixeira posted around 100 classified documents to a Discord server where he was known only by the moniker OG. In case you don't know, Discord is a place where private groups can send messages a la AOL chat rooms from like 1997, okay? This Discord server is called Thug Central and was allegedly a place where OG and his friends talked about video games, liking guns, and shared racist memes, so that's nice. The documents that OG, aka Jack, posted to the server include information on the extent of surveillance the US conducts on Russia, but also on our allies. Embarrassing. And it also included a document about the war in Ukraine that appeared to be altered, showing higher casualties for Ukraine and lower casualties for Russia. It's still unclear what this guy's intent was, though I imagine that that's gonna come out in the days to come. My theory is that he's a dumb 21-year-old who, for reasons yet to be uncovered, had a weirdly high amount of security clearance and access to classified documents and wanted to show off to his Discord friends. Jack was arrested by heavily armed FBI agents in his home in Massachusetts last Thursday and was formally charged with various crimes, including violating the Espionage Act, a century-old, controversial law that may sound a little familiar. Let's talk about espionage and what's the difference between someone who's a willful criminal, a courageous whistleblower, or just an idiot with access to classified information. Roll the intro. Thank you to my partner on today's video, Rocket Money. As many of you know, I bought a nearly 140-year-old house not too long ago. You know what comes with old friggin' houses? A lot of bills, a lot of renovations, a lot of things to fix, and a never-ending list of to-dos. Luckily, there's Rocket Money. Rocket Money can help you plan for home renovations, retirement, and other major life events. Rocket Money is an all-in-one finance platform that helps you save more and spend less. Get this, Rocket Money allows you to manage subscriptions, lower bills, monitor your credit score, and build your savings all in one place. One feature that I love is the subscription cancellation feature. Rocket Money will go through and identify recurring charges in your bills, and they will cancel unwanted subscriptions for you, all with just a tap. And you can actually get Rocket Money to lower your bills for you. You just have to upload a photo and tap a button, and then Rocket Money will negotiate your bills for you, from internet bills to cable to phone bills. You can also have Rocket Money monitor your budgets and let you know when you've exceeded them. 3.4 million members trust Rocket Money with their finances. To try Rocket Money for free and unlock more features with premium, head to rocketmoney.com/Leeja or click the link in the description below. You can also scan the QR code on the screen to get started. Thanks, Rocket Money. So Jack Douglas Teixeira has been charged with violating the Espionage Act related to the unlawful copying and transmitting of sensitive defense material and unlawful removal of defense material to an unauthorized location. He could face up to 10 years in prison based on the charges that have been unsealed against him so far. These charges, however, are connected to a single leaked document, that one discussing the status of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which included troop movements on a particular date. More charges are likely as authorities continue to sift through all the documents, meaning that Jack Douglas Teixeira, depending on the number of times he separately uploaded and transmitted each document, could face even more charges under the Espionage Act. Ah, the Espionage Act. You've heard of it. Why? Because it's the same act that was listed in the warrant to search Trump's Mar-a-Lago home in search of top secret documents. Specifically, we're talking Section 18 U.S.C. 793, which deals with the gathering, transmitting, or losing of national defense information. In short, and in relevant part, the Espionage Act says that anyone who has authorized possession of documents relating to the national defense that the possessor has reason to believe could be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of any foreign nation, who then willfully transmits or delivers those documents to someone else who is not authorized to have them, or misplaces them and doesn't tell the proper authorities, is guilty under the Act and could face up to 10 years in prison. But the Espionage Act has a controversial history that spanned the last century. The original bill was passed in 1917 as an outgrowth of the federal government's efforts during World War I to contain not only espionage but also public criticism of its war efforts. In 1918, amendments were made to the Espionage Act. Those amendments were known as the Sedition Act of 1918. If this sounds familiar, this was a revisiting of the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798, which were later done away with. But then I guess Congress in 1918 was like, wait, that was actually a great idea. Let's add those back in. The Sedition Act, you see, made it a crime to willfully utter, print, write, or publish any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States or the Constitution of the United States. You can see, I hope, where that would be controversial. Generally, where a government or leader requires full loyalty and zero dissenting voices, you got some fascism afoot, my friend. Or at the very least, you got a First Amendment issue, which is why Congress did away with the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798. But in the face of the Great War, World War I, Congress in 1918 was like, bring it back. Fuck the First Amendment. It was so controversial that it literally led to the founding of the ACLU, initially called the Civil Liberties Bureau. But despite numerous challenges at the Supreme Court, the laws were upheld. In 1919, in Schenck versus US, the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment did not protect people who circulated anti-draft literature, which is wild if you know anything about how careful the Supreme Court is now, or at least was 5 years ago. Who knows about this court? How careful they were about anything that even whiffed of limiting First Amendment rights, okay? But the 1919 Supreme Court was like, fuck it. Anti-draft literature isn't protected under the Constitution, straight to jail.
Right to jail.
This happened again in Abrams v. United States when the court said that immigrants publicly opposing the US intervention into the Bolshevik Revolution were not protected under the Constitution.
Right to jail, right away.
By 1921, the war was over and people came to their senses, and Congress repealed the Sedition Act amendments because, again, not giving people the right to criticize their government is like really fascist.
You right to jail.
However, the Espionage Act lived on and has been used numerous times throughout history, especially in the prosecution of spies and whistleblowers. In 1941, again during wartime fervor in Gorin versus US, a Soviet spy was sent stolen information about Japanese Americans and Japanese nationals from a disgruntled civilian naval intelligence employee. Both men were convicted under the Espionage Act, and the Supreme Court was like, yeah, straight to jail.
Jail. Right away.
However, in that case, the court did question what qualified under national defense information. Like, how broad is national defense information? What's protected under the act? We don't know, okay? But the court said that it was probably something around intent or reason to believe that the information to be obtained was to be used to the injury of the United States or to the advantage of any foreign nation. That's the closest we got to a definition of what counts as national defense information. But even that has been wishy-washy over the years. The most recent Espionage Act case to come before the Supreme Court was back in 1971. Ever heard of the Pentagon Papers? They were a top-secret Pentagon study of the US government's decision-making related to the Vietnam War. A man named Daniel Ellsberg released the papers to the New York Times and the Washington Post, among other publications, because they contained embarrassing amounts of information showing that JFK, and then after him, Lyndon B. Johnson, had lied to the American people and to Congress about numerous aspects about the Vietnam War. In New York Times versus the US, the Supreme Court ordered that the president did not have the power to bar the New York Times or the Washington Post from publishing the Pentagon Papers, saying that the Espionage Act didn't go so far as to bar newspapers from publishing this kind of information. Side note, however, the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsberg, he's pretty badass, okay? He's an academic who worked at the RAND Corporation, focusing on nuclear strategy. During his work there, he became disillusioned with the Vietnam War, leading to him releasing the Pentagon Papers. He was tried under the Espionage Act, but so much information came out during his trial about illegal wiretapping by the government and the government's attempt to steal his medical records to show he was mentally unfit and to discredit him, among other things, that the judge just fully dismissed the case. If he had been found guilty, Daniel Ellsberg could have faced 115 years in prison. In the years since, he's been active in anti-war activism, including against the US war in Iraq, military action in Iran, and even against US support for Ukraine, which makes sense, I guess. I mean, he watched us enter a war in Vietnam that didn't really involve us, and watched as it completely fell apart and hundreds of thousands of lives were needlessly lost. By the way, if you haven't seen the Ken Burns documentary about the Vietnam War, holy shit, you gotta watch that. Okay? He even participated in the Occupy movement, camping out in 2011 in the UC Berkeley Sproul Plaza at 80 years old. He has also vocally supported whistleblowers Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. Both Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden were charged with violating the Espionage Act. If you'll recall, Edward Snowden leaked highly sensitive information about the NSA in 2013 when he was an employee and subcontractor, revealing numerous global surveillance programs and prompting a widespread cultural conversation about national security, as well as bringing the idea of people's individual privacy to the forefront of the social conversation, really for the first time at this scale. Edward Snowden was charged with violating the Espionage Act. The US canceled his passport. He still somehow got on an airplane to Russia, where he was held in the airport terminal for a month. He was eventually granted the right to asylum in Russia, and he was later granted Russian citizenship in 2022. You see, the US and Russia do not have an extradition treaty, so there's no agreement that a criminal inside Russia will be handed over to the US. So there he remains to this day. Not sure which is worse, prison or Russia. Chelsea Manning, on the other hand, leaked nearly 750,000 classified or sensitive military and diplomatic documents to WikiLeaks in 2009. She had access to them through her position in the military. She was soon arrested and charged with violating the Espionage Act, among other things. She was eventually found guilty in 2013 and sentenced to 35 years in prison. After serving 7 years, Obama commuted her sentence, meaning shortened it to basically time served plus I think like 4 months, saying that the 35-year sentence was very disproportionate relative to what other leakers have received. Just to fit her in the timeline, she was sentenced in 2013, so at the height of the Edward Snowden fervor and his escape. So some saw her as a scapegoat for other whistleblowers who got away, including WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Now, the actual effects and consequences of Chelsea's leaks were varied. The leaks affected countries around the world, like this was a global conversation. The US Navy claimed that the leaks put the lives of American soldiers and Afghan informants in danger. Some called her the most important whistleblower since Daniel Ellsberg leaked the Pentagon Papers. Some have cited WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning with being part of the catalyst that led to the Arab Spring in 2010, because the leaks exposed government corruption, though others have said they really didn't play that big of a role. A Department of Defense report written 1 year after the leak found that the leaks had no significant strategic impact on US war efforts. And then there was, of course, Chelsea Manning's transition and existence as a trans woman in the Army and in all-male prisons. And this was a decade ago, when being a trans person was even further outside what was deemed societally acceptable or mainstream than it is even now. So the social and political discourse over that aspect of the story was also just shockingly fucked up. But given the fact that the Department of Defense itself was like, nah, the leaks didn't actually really affect our war efforts, that makes her 35-year prison sentence all the more seem like overkill. You know what I mean? So what I hope that this overview has shown you is that the Espionage Act and the cases it has been used in is a very strange and varied law, which is steeped in some of the most pivotal, painful moments in the last century of American history. It's tied to spies, to consequential government reports, to whistleblowers attempting to turn the tides of war, but also to 21-year-old National Guardsmen trying to impress their friends on a Discord server, and to idiots who probably shoved the documents into a box and took them either out of sheer stupidity or in a spiteful temper tantrum because baby didn't win the presidency. But it's all in how you look at it. Maybe this kid who just leaked these documents did have an underlying, deeper motivation. Maybe Trump is an American hero who's being persecuted by a corrupt leftist government. Maybe Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, and Daniel Ellsberg are all enemies of the state who put our country at risk and should rot in prison. Who counts as a whistleblower and who counts as a willful criminal is a hazy question that depends on too many factors to count, but technically, it's all a crime under the Espionage Act. So I guess today, kids, is another lesson in trying to shift our understanding of the criminal code into a grayer zone, one where being a criminal and doing something wrong doesn't necessarily line up. All right? As the highly influential American rock group The Fray once so eloquently put it, sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. Thanks again to Rocket Money for partnering with me on today's video. To try Rocket Money for free and unlock more features with premium, head to rocketmoney.com/Leeja or click the link in the description below. You can also scan the QR code on the screen to get started today. Thanks, Rocket Money. If you liked this video, you might also like last week's video all about how dark money in the Supreme Court is so much worse than you think. Thanks so much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.